Over on Jaguar Gatorade, a new college football video is out. In this video, we talk about the reverse Aaron Judge game, and how one time in 1995, one ABC affiliate decided to show the end of a college football game instead of the start of the World Series. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. Someone want to explain to me how the heck the Indianapolis Colts are sitting at 500? I know there's that old theory about you are what your record says you are. But the Colts at 500?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
When you watch them play, they look like one of the worst teams in all of football. Through 5 games, they've scored a not-so-nice 69 points, averaging only 13.8 points per game, which is, by far, the lowest average in the NFL. Heck, their 69 points scored is the lowest total in the AFC, and they've played an extra game compared to everyone else not named the Denver Broncos. Their point differential, a -25, is the 3rd worst in the NFL, and is only ahead of the Tennessee Titans and the Washington Commanders for the worst total in the league. Starting quarterback Matt Ryan looks completely washed up, throwing more interceptions than touchdowns, having thrown more interceptions than any other quarterback in football, and having been sacked more often than any quarterback, having been sacked 21 times, for an average of more than 4 times a game and more than once a quarter. The ground game, which was a major threat last season and was a big reason why the Colts were in it right until the very end, has done nothing. Through 5 games, they're averaging just 3.6 yards per carry, and they rank 26th in rushing yards, 27th in yards per carry, and dead last in rushing touchdowns, having not scored on the ground since opening day against the Houston Texans. Over Indy's last 90 minutes of gameplay, they have not found the end zone. In today's NFL, going an hour and a half without scoring a touchdown just doesn't seem possible. In the first quarter of games this season, the Colts have scored 10 points total, averaging 2 points per first quarter, and the only reason the number is even that high has nothing to do with them, as that's because in their Week 3 game against the Kansas City Chiefs, rookie wide receiver Sky Moore muffed a punt, which gave the Colts the ball at Kansas City's 4-yard line. They've turned the ball over in every single game thus far, and their turnover margin through 5 games is an abysmal -6, meaning that they're losing the turnover battle by more than 1 turnover per game. And head coach Frank Reich, who has a flaming hot seat, has made some absolutely abysmal decisions this season, including a really dumb decision to kick a field goal with 2 minutes left against the Titans while down by 7, which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And yet, despite all of that, somehow, the Indianapolis Colts are 500. For some perspective, the Baltimore Ravens have trailed in their games for 13 seconds total this season. They have the same winning percentage as the Colts right now. The Jacksonville Jaguars have outscored their opponents by 49 points over the last 3.5 games. They have the same winning percentage as the Colts right now. The San Francisco 49ers have the 2nd best point differential in the NFC, have outscored their opponents by 34 points over the last 3 games, and have the best defense in football, allowing just 46 points through 4 games, for an average of 11.5 points per game. They have the same winning percentage as the Colts right now. You get the idea. Somehow, the Colts, as bad as they've looked and as bad as they played, are 500. If you told a Colts fan at the start of the season that through 5 weeks, they would have to go to Jacksonville, a place where they hadn't won since 2014, play Tennessee, a team that got the #1 seed in the AFC last year, play Kansas City, a consistently dominant team that's made it to 4 straight conference championships, and play Denver on the road on a short week, and they would not be below 500? The crazy part is that, even though no one expected it to be like this, I think just about every Colts fan would have taken that deal. The Colts being 500 truly makes no sense. And that got me to thinking. There's always a ton of debate each season when a team has a unique record as to how good or bad they actually are. In 2015, there were debates constantly about whether or not the Carolina Panthers were the worst 15-1 team in NFL history. In 2017, you had debates about whether or not the Cleveland Browns were the best 0-16 or the best winless team in NFL history. Throughout the 2020 season, until they finally lost, there were non-stop debates about just how good the undefeated Steelers were, and that they're the worst 9-0 team ever, the worst 10-0 team ever, the worst 11-0 team ever. You get the idea. And you know what? The Colts' record of 2-2-1 is incredibly unique. You don't see teams every year fitting into that category, where they're perfectly sitting at 500 after an odd number of games. So with how bad the Colts have looked through the eye test, and yet how surprisingly decent their record is, I think we have to ask ourselves the question, are the Colts the worst 2-2-1 team in NFL history? Well, we're going to find out. Since the NFL-AFL merger in 1970, there have been 11 teams that sat at 2-2-1 through 5 games. You have the 1970 Oakland Raiders, the 1971 New Orleans Saints, the 1972 San Diego Chargers, the 1974 Denver Broncos, the 1987 Green Bay Packers, and then you had a surprising uptick in the number of teams to be at that record. 2 teams from 1974 to 2017 since overtime in the regular season was implemented. And then, including the Colts, a whopping 6 teams since 2018, including the 2018 Minnesota Vikings, the 2018 Green Bay Packers, the 2018 Cleveland Browns, the 2018 Pittsburgh Steelers, and the 2019 Detroit Lions. We're going to break down just how the Colts stack up against each of these teams in a variety of metrics. But spoiler alert, you can absolutely make the legitimate argument that the Colts are the worst team in NFL history, at least since the merger more than half a century ago, to sit exactly at 500 after 5 games. First off, let's start with the offense, because that's what people really look at with the Colts and are puzzled with as to how their record is decent. As I said before, through 5 games, the Colts have scored 69 points. If we stack that offense against every other team with a 2-2-1 record, they're dead last, and depending on how you want to look at it, it's not even close. I say it's not even close because you can absolutely put an asterisk next to the 1987 Packers total of 72 points, since 3 of those 5 games were played during the strike, where replacement players were there who would never play for Green Bay again afterwards. It was, for all intents and purposes, a completely different team. In terms of non-replacement teams, the worst of the bunch is the 1972 San Diego Chargers, who score 90 points, averaging 18 points per game. And remember, the Chargers didn't play any overtime periods, while the Colts have played in 2, so the Colts have played an additional 20 or so minutes. Unlike the Colts, the Chargers showed flashes of brilliance on offense through their first 5, including a 37-point outing against the Denver Broncos in Week 2. They crossed the 20-point barrier twice in those 5 games, while the Colts have failed to score more than 20 points in any game so far this season. Excluding the Colts, the average 2-2-1 team through 5 games has scored 109 points total, or just under 22 points per game. The Colts, as I said before, have failed to score 22 points in any game this season. What about from a point differential standpoint? Here, the Colts are also dead last, right at the bottom of the pack, although at least they've got some company this time, being tied with the 1971 New Orleans Saints, who are also at minus 25. The difference between the 1971 Saints and the 2022 Colts, as you might have been able to guess, is how exactly they got to this point differential. For the Colts, they've only been blown out in 1 game, as the game against the Jaguars was the only game where they lost by more than 1 possession, losing 24-0. As for the Saints, their losses were ugly with a capital U, as both of their losses were by 3 possessions, with the team losing by 18 points in Week 2 to the San Francisco 49ers, and losing by 21 points in Week 4 on the road to the Chicago Bears. With the wins, the Colts' wins have been extremely close affairs, with both wins being decided by 3 points. As for the Saints, both of their wins were by more than that, including one of the most shocking regular season results of the entire 1970s, when they somehow defeated the reigning NFC champion and the soon-to-be Super Bowl champion Dallas Cowboys by 10 points, and they did it with a rookie quarterback. So pick your poison as to which team you think is the worst from that metric. The team that had one true stinker, but can't win without squeaking it out, or the team that gets blown out in losses, but actually looks convincing in wins. For the record, prior to the Colts, the average point differential for these teams was minus 6.5 points, with 5 teams in the positives and 5 teams in the negatives, perfectly balanced. So the Colts have a point differential that is 3 possessions worse than the average of the 2-2-1 teams that preceded them. As mentioned before, the Colts have been downright careless with the football, turning the ball over 11 times, and have only forced 5 turnovers of their own, giving them a turnover margin of -6. Where does this rank against the rest of the 2-2-1 teams? Not well. Not well at all. In fact, it ranks dead last. Prior to the Colts, the average turnover margin across all these teams was plus 1.1. So unlike the point differential stat, it was actually in the positives. And here come the Colts to completely tank that average. In fact, there's only one team with a turnover margin even in the same ballpark as the Colts, and that's the 1972 Chargers, who, even though they turned it over 18 times, turning it over 5 times in 2 games and multiple times in all 5 games, they forced 13 turnovers of their own, including 6 in that convincing 37-14 win over the Denver Broncos in Week 2. So just to recap so far, the Colts have the worst offense by a comfortable margin, the worst point differential, and the worst turnover margin. Their one saving grace thus far has been their defense, which has only allowed 94 points for an average of 18.8 points per game. That's the second best total amongst all the 2-2-1 teams. And the only team better was the 1987 Packers, who allowed 82 points. But we have to put an asterisk next to them, because for 3 of their 5 games, they were playing against replacement players who could not catch a football. Seriously, if you've never seen a replacement game, watch the offensive quality, or lack thereof. The defense could have 8 men on the field the whole time instead of 11, and still only allow 17 points in the game. The defense is literally the only argument and the only thing in saying that the Colts are not actually the worst 2-2-1 team ever. Because by every other metric, not only are they clearly the worst, but it's not even close. So I guess that raises the final question. What does this mean for the Colts? How do teams that go 2-2-1 do? Well, unfortunately for the Colts, the last 9 teams to do this all did next to nothing in terms of fighting for the playoffs. The only team in the post-merger era to start 2-2-1 and make it to the playoffs was the 1970 Oakland Raiders, who won the AFC West with an 8-4-2 record. However, they were extremely unique in the sense that they went winless through their first 3 games. They were not up and down like every other team on this list. They were a team that once they got going, they were set, and were one of the most formidable opponents in all of football. If you want to learn more about the 1970 Raiders, click the card in the upper right corner. But for every other team, they failed to make the playoffs, and oftentimes, they finish with a losing record. The average combined record of the last 9 teams to start 2-2-1 is 53, 74, and 10, with the 1971 Saints being the only team that actually tied an additional game that season. If you convert that number to a winning percentage, it comes out to just 42.3%, which is 7 wins over the course of a 17-game season, meaning a 7-9-1 record. In other words, traditionally speaking, teams that start off this average will usually stay this average the rest of the way, so take that for what it's worth. Regardless, I don't think any team has had a weirder start to the season than the Colts. By all accounts, they should be winless. If Chris Jones doesn't get called for taunting after a sack, or if Kansas City special teams literally does anything productive, they lose that game. And if Nathaniel Hackett literally calls a running play on 3rd and 4 with 2 minutes left, instead of designing a pass into the end zone for no reason, they lose that game. We should be looking at the Colts as an 0-4-1 team, with Frank Reich being hand in the middle of the season. Instead, they're tied for first place in the AFC South after being gift-wrapped 2 wins. It's truly bizarre. But look, like they say, you are what your record says you are. And even if the Colts might be the worst 2-2-1 team ever, at the end of the day, they're still 2-2-1. And even if history isn't exactly on their side, they've definitely given themselves a chance to compete for the division and the playoffs going forward. And especially this season, where everything seems to be upside down, that's all you can really ask for. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.